Welcome back. Before we get into today's cheating, lies, and public humiliation in high definition, do me a quick favor. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. That way, every time some of these bad decisions come back wearing Karma's favorite shoes, you'll have a front row seat. Let's get into it. Merab cheated on her husband for months, drained money from their joint account, lied to their son, and let Michael walk around thinking he was the one failing his family. She watched him work himself numb while she built a second life in plain sight. She let her cousins laugh with her about how slow he was to catch on. She even brought another man into the house Michael helped pay for. Here's how it happened. What makes this story sting is not just the cheating. It is the way betrayal settled into every room of their life in Charlotte, North Carolina, until Michael could barely recognize his own home. Michael was the kind of man people trusted without even knowing why. He was quiet, broad-shouldered, careful with words, and steady in a way that made other people feel safe. He managed maintenance for a chain of apartment buildings across Mecklenburg County and often left before sunrise. He kept a little notebook in his truck where he wrote grocery lists, bill reminders, and things Merab mentioned wanting. He was not flashy. He was a husband who remembered exact coffee orders and the father who packed extra napkins in the glove compartment. His love language was usefulness. He believed that if he kept showing up, life would eventually return the favor. Before everything curdled, their marriage had real warmth in it. On summer evenings, they sat on lawn chairs outside their duplex in West Charlotte, eating grilled corn and laughing at neighbors who argued dramatically over tiny things like trash bins and fantasy football. Merab used to lean her head on Michael's shoulder and call him old-fashioned because he still printed coupons and sorted them by store. One night she laughed so hard at his coupon sermon that sweet tea came out of her nose, and Michael nearly fell out of his chair trying to help while also laughing. Those moments were small, but they felt like a real life. They met years earlier at a church fish fry in Columbia, South Carolina, when Michael spilled hot sauce on his white t-shirt and tried to act like it was part of the design. Merab had laughed, handed him napkins, and told him confidence only worked when the shirt was not glowing orange. He asked for her number with such awkward sincerity that she said yes before she could stop herself. For a while, they were good together. He drove to see her every weekend, sometimes with gas money so low he prayed over the dashboard. They built a romance out of playlists, cheap dates, and stubborn hope. The first crack showed up after Michael's mother got sick. Her care swallowed time, money, and patience. Michael spent weekends driving to Greensboro to help with doctor visits while Merab stayed back in Charlotte with their teenage son, Isaiah. Stress changed the temperature in the house. Merab began acting annoyed by Michael's exhaustion, as if his grief was an inconvenience. She rolled her eyes when he forgot small things. She snapped when he fell asleep on the couch. Still, he blamed the season they were in. He told himself marriage had winters. He did not yet understand that while he was trying to survive hardship, Merab was already choosing disloyalty. Then came the new version of Merab, softer voice with her phone than with her husband, unexplained errands, late-night smiles at messages she turned away from him. Michael noticed, but he noticed the way decent people notice danger, slowly, then all at once. He asked if everything was okay. She answered with offense so sharp it made him apologize for asking. That became the pattern. She made secrecy sound like privacy, cruelty sound like honesty, and his confusion sound like weakness. If he questioned a charge on the bank statement, she called him controlling. If he asked where she had been, she called him insecure. Little by little, Michael stopped trusting himself. The worst part was how lonely betrayal can make a person before the truth even arrives. Michael would stand in the kitchen at midnight, staring at the humming refrigerator, trying to remember the last easy conversation they had. Merab moved through the house like she had already left it emotionally. She withheld affection with surgical precision. Some nights she climbed into bed smelling like expensive perfume he had not bought, then turned her back before he could speak. Other nights she stayed with friends, and came home carrying fast food cups from neighborhoods she had no reason to be in. He kept accepting her explanations because the alternative felt like jumping off a roof. Isaiah was 15 and old enough to be hurt, but still young enough to be manipulated. Merab fed him a quiet poison. She told him his father cared more about work than family. She said Michael was always angry, always absent, always disappointed in them. None of it was true, but lies repeated inside a house start to cling to the walls. Isaiah became short with his father, then dismissive, then cold. When Michael asked if he wanted to shoot hoops, Isaiah shrugged him off. When Michael reminded him about homework, the boy muttered, "Why do you care now?" That sentence landed harder than anything Merab ever said. Merab's family made it uglier. Her cousin Rochelle hosted girls' nights that were really cover stories. Her brother Damien, who borrowed money from Michael twice and never repaid it, suddenly became brave enough to lecture him about being too stiff and not exciting enough for his wife. Michael felt the disrespect changing shape in real time. People who used to speak to him with warmth now spoke as though he were a tolerated burden. At a cookout in Gastonia, Merab disappeared for 40 minutes, and when Michael asked where she had been, Rochelle laughed and said, "Lord, let that woman breathe." Everybody smirked except Michael. He stood there holding hamburger buns like an idiot. One funny memory from that cookout stayed with him for strange reasons. Damien had tried to show off on the grill, talking big about his secret technique, then somehow managed to light one eyebrow on fire. For 2 glorious seconds, the whole backyard froze before Damien started slapping his own face and yelling, "My face! My face!" Even Merab laughed until she bent over. Michael had rushed in with a cup of lemonade and tossed it straight at Damien, who smelled like citrus and burnt pride for the rest of the evening. That should have been the story people remembered. Instead, Michael later realized that same night Merab had been sneaking off to text another man. The financial betrayal surfaced next. Michael noticed the joint account looked thinner despite his overtime checks. At first he blamed rising prices, then a billing error, then his own memory. But the numbers kept refusing to behave. Small cash withdrawals, boutique purchases, hotel charges in South End, gas station receipts from parts of town neither of them used. When he asked Merab, she gave him a tired look and said adulthood cost money. Then she accused him of acting like a prison guard. Michael almost believed her until the rent nearly bounced. He sat in his truck outside the bank gripping the steering wheel, feeling humiliation spread through his chest like heat. He started keeping records then, though even that felt disloyal to him. Michael was not a detective by nature. He was a husband trying to prove his marriage was still real. He printed statements at lunch, highlighted charges at night, and tucked everything into a manila folder behind old tax papers. One Saturday morning, he found Merab laughing on the back porch, speaking in a voice he had not heard directed at him in years. Soft, playful, alive. When she saw him through the screen door, her face shut down instantly. She ended the call and asked why he was creeping around his own house. Somehow, by the end of it, he was apologizing again. The moment that truly broke him came on a rainy Thursday. Michael got sent home early because of a power issue at one property. He stopped for catfish and fries from a place Merab liked, thinking a surprise meal might thaw the ice between them. He parked quietly, came in through the side gate, and heard laughter from inside the bedroom. Not television laughter, not Isaiah on a game. Adult laughter, low and intimate. Michael stood still long enough for the food to go warm in his hands. Then he opened the door and found Merab there with another man, both of them shocked for 1 second and shameless the next. The man jumped up, but Michael barely looked at him. He looked at Merab. That was the pain. Not the stranger zipping his jeans, not the half-made bed, not the smell of his own house turned foreign. It was Merab's face. No guilt, no panic worth naming, just irritation at being interrupted. She said, "Since you know now, maybe stop acting confused all the time." Michael felt something cave in behind his ribs. He put the food down on the dresser because his hands had started shaking. The stranger muttered that he should leave. Michael stepped aside and let him pass, because at that moment rage felt smaller than grief. The argument afterward was less of an argument than a burial. Merab admitted the affair had been going on for months. She said Michael had become boring, heavy, emotionally draining. She said she deserved joy. She said people evolved and he had not. When he asked how she could do that in their home, she laughed once, a dry, ugly sound, and said it was her home too. Then came the deepest cut. She told him Isaiah already knew they were having problems and was old enough to understand why she had checked out. She used polished language for ugly behavior. Michael slept in his truck that night in a grocery store parking lot. For the next few weeks, Michael moved like a man underwater. He showered at work, ate vending machine crackers for dinner, drove to a public park in the evenings just to avoid the feeling of being unwelcome in his own life. He cried once at a red light when an old R&B song came on and reminded him of a road trip he and Merab had taken to Savannah, singing badly and missing exits on purpose just to stay in the car longer. That memory felt cruel now. The romance had not been fake, but it had become irrelevant. There's a special pain in realizing your best memories matter more to you than the person who made them with you. The abandonment spread beyond the marriage. When Michael tried talking to Isaiah, the boy stared at his phone and said, "Maybe if you listened more, Mom wouldn't have needed somebody else." Michael had to sit down. He did not even answer. He just sat on the edge of Isaiah's bed and nodded once, as if someone had read a sentence over him in a language he did not understand. Later, in the hallway, he heard Merab telling her son not to let anyone guilt him for speaking his truth. The house had become a place where disrespect was coached like a skill. Michael stopped trying to defend himself to people determined to misunderstand him. But pain can sharpen a person once it stops drowning him. Michael called an attorney in uptown Charlotte after a coworker named Mrs. Denise slipped him a business card and said, "Baby, stop bleeding in public for people who brought the knife." She was 60, elegant, and had a laugh like church bells. When Michael explained the situation, she did not offer pity first. She offered instructions. Get statements, backup texts, change direct deposit, document everything. Her practical tone saved him. It gave his suffering a direction. For the first time in months, he felt the faint outline of control returning. Not hope yet, just structure. Sometimes structure is the first mercy. Michael followed every instruction with almost religious discipline. He pulled phone records, copied screenshots, printed bank statements, and made a timeline so detailed it looked like a construction plan. He learned that Merab had been paying for dinners, gifts, and weekend hotel stays with money meant for utilities and mortgage payments. He found messages where she mocked him to friends, calling him a human routine and saying he was too loyal to ever leave. That sentence changed him more than the affair itself. It showed contempt, not just betrayal. Michael stopped longing for reconciliation that day. Love can survive hardship. It cannot survive being treated like a joke. Still, life insisted on its odd moments of comedy. One afternoon at work, Michael accidentally sent his lawyer a photo of a broken water heater with the caption, "This one leaking from every side," intending it for his supervisor. Mrs. Alvarez, the lawyer, replied 2 minutes later, "Sir, that description also fits your marriage, but please send exhibits in the correct thread." Michael laughed so hard he had to lean against his truck. It was the first full laugh he had allowed himself in weeks. That small, ridiculous exchange did not heal him, but it reminded him he was still there beneath the hurt, still capable of reacting to life with something other than numbness. The event Merab could not escape was not a party or church banquet. It was family court in Harris County after she moved briefly to Texas with dreams of starting over with her affair partner, only for that man to drop her the moment real bills appeared. She came back east, then filed aggressively, assuming Michael would be too broken to fight. Instead, jurisdiction followed the money trail and custody issues where they landed, and Merab had to appear. Court was the one room where performance had limits. No cousin could talk over evidence. No friend could toast her selfishness as self-care. No carefully rehearsed version of events could erase receipts. Michael walked into that courthouse in a plain navy suit he had owned for 10 years. He did not look flashy, just clean, calm, and finished with being underestimated. Merab arrived dressed sharp, chin lifted, still carrying that air of offended innocence. She expected him to crumble or lash out. He did neither. Mrs. Alvarez laid out the case piece by piece. The affair expenditures, the hotel records, the withdrawals, the messages, the timeline showing how family funds disappeared while Michael covered essentials and slept in his truck. Michael did not need dramatic speeches. Truth, when organized properly, has its own voice. Merab's expression changed only when she realized the judge was listening closely. What satisfied Michael was how ordinary the reckoning looked. No gasps, no cinematic confession, just consequences, clear and measured. The judge saw financial misconduct for what it was. Temporary assumptions vanished under paperwork. Merab's attempts to spin herself as neglected collapsed against dates, charges, and her own messages. She was ordered into a settlement far less favorable than the one she had expected. Certain financial claims she thought she could make evaporated. Her credibility took a direct hit where it mattered most. She had spent months treating Michael like a harmless fool. In that courtroom, she discovered that quiet men sometimes keep the best records and make the strongest final moves. Merab did not cry afterward. She did not apologize. She did not suddenly become human. In the hallway, she hissed that Michael was petty, bitter, and sneaky, as if accountability were a trick he had played on her. He looked at her for a long second and realized something freeing. She would never tell the truth about herself, even to herself. That was no longer his burden. She walked away angry, carrying consequences like they had been unfairly assigned. Michael felt no triumph in her face, only release in his own body. The fight was not satisfying because she suffered publicly. It was satisfying because her control over him had ended. After court, Michael did not celebrate with crowds. He bought takeout from a little barbecue spot outside Houston, sat alone in his truck, and ate slowly while the evening light turned copper across the windshield. Then he called Isaiah. The conversation was awkward at first, all long pauses and careful breathing. But without Merab narrating reality from the next room, cracks began to show in the story the boy had been told. Michael did not force forgiveness. He just spoke plainly. He said adults fail. He said love should never require lies. He said he had always shown up and still would. By the end, Isaiah's voice had softened. Michael later moved to Atlanta, Georgia, not to run but to rebuild. He rented a modest brick townhouse in Decatur with squeaky stairs and a tiny patio barely big enough for 2 chairs. He started going to the gym at 6 in the morning, not chasing some revenge buddy fantasy, just trying to feel present inside himself again. He learned how to cook more than survival meals. His lemon pepper salmon became serious business. One Sunday, he burned rice so badly the smoke alarm nearly summoned the whole zip code, and he stood there waving a dish towel like a defeated orchestra conductor, laughing alone in a clean kitchen that belonged entirely to him. Healing brought romance back into his life, though quietly and without spectacle. Not immediately, and not as rescue. It began with small things. A bookseller named Lauren at a shop in East Atlanta who noticed he kept buying history biographies and asked why serious men never read fiction. A conversation stretched into coffee. Coffee stretched into evening walks. She liked his steadiness instead of calling it boring. He liked that she never fished for pain but listened when he offered it. The first time she took his hand, Michael felt fear before comfort. Then comfort won. Love returned differently this time. Less dazzled, more honest, and therefore much safer. One night Michael cooked for Lauren, and halfway through dinner the patio chair cracked under him and dropped him straight to the concrete with his plate still in hand. He landed flat, looked stunned for one beat, then calmly said, "I'd like the record to show the chicken remained intact." Lauren laughed so hard she cried, then sat beside him on the ground eating roasted potatoes from her plate while they both lost it. That laughter was intimate in a way cheating never understands. It was not built on secrecy, thrill, or ego. It was built on ease. Michael recognized then that peace can feel romantic too. Meanwhile, Merab's life never turned cinematic. It simply narrowed. The affair partner vanished. Some relatives who had cheered her choices grew scarce once there was no money, no drama worth attending, no one else to blame. She remained proud in the most useless way, insisting consequences were persecution. Michael heard pieces of this through family channels and let them pass through him without sticking. His success stayed private. He paid his bills early, restored his credit, repaired his relationship with Isaiah one steady phone call and weekend visit at a time. He slept well. He laughed more. He no longer checked his mirrors for the version of himself betrayal had nearly erased. The moral is not that karma always arrives with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as paperwork, distance, silence, and the slow collapse of lies under their own weight. Sometimes justice is simply losing access to a good man you were too arrogant to value. Michael's comeback was powerful because it was not loud. He did not beg to be chosen, and he did not build a life around proving anything to the people who hurt him. He chose discipline over drama, truth over performance, and peace over revenge. In the end, Merab kept her pride and lost what mattered. Michael lost his illusion and found himself, which turned out to be worth more. If you made it to the end, you're officially family now. So hit like and subscribe, and come back for more love, betrayal, and the kind of karma that always shows up dressed nice.